Sit down, sit down, sit down. Thank you. Thank you very much. Gary was talking about something very interesting about this being an outline of the courageous. An interesting fact was the first America's Cup that I ever attended live was with Courageous. And when I sailed out of Boston to sail around the world, the ship that led me out in the flotilla into the ocean was Courageous. Now, how's that for a circle? I was asked to share some of my things that I learned at sea. And I was reminded that I said at one time when I returned, there are some stories I can share with everyone and they'll understand. There are some stories I can share with other sailors and they'll understand. There are some stories I can share only with solo sailors and they'll understand. But there are some stories I can't share with anyone because you have had to have been there to see it for yourself. I never planned to be a solo sailor. While I was racing in Lake Michigan, I was the crew captain on a Swan 44 called Shadow, great boat. And I was the crew chief, so I was allowed to take the boat out anytime I wanted to, for beer cans or just for a fun sail. But I had to have 4 people with me. Could you imagine what it's like to round up 4 people at any time who all have something else they want to do better than go sailing? Particularly since most of them were neophytes. So I solved that problem very quickly. I bought myself a boat, a 28-foot Pearson Triton, which was one of the early fiberglass boats that they built. Had the same problem. Now it's down to 2 people. Couldn't get them to go out with me on a regular basis. So I solved that with this solution. I re-rigged her and sailed it alone. First around in the harbor, then I took it out in the lake and I sailed up and down the lake shore. I always wore a harness. At that time, this is in the early 60s, not many people on the Great Lakes wore a harness because the waves weren't big enough, and if the wind was blowing more than 20 miles an hour, they didn't go out. So they didn't need a harness. But I got the name of being the Lone Ranger when I sailed out by myself. Now, I read everything that mentioned sailing. I loved to read. That was one of my big things in school. And I read about a teacher in New England named Mame Reynolds. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of her. She was a teacher who saw the BOC, and one of the early races, as a means of helping her students understand the subject that were being taught in school. I think she was one of the pioneers in the STEM system that's now being taught along with sailing all over the country. And that made me think of something. How could I use my sailing for my grandchildren? That was a good idea. And that's what I thought. If they saw the things they were learning in school through my eyes and my experiences, it would help them later on in life. The idea was to get a bigger boat. Now I had a 28-footer. Now I'm going to go to a 35-footer, and I'm going to sail through the Panama and the Suez Canals and write to them and tell them what I was going to do. Well, the wheels fell off that wagon, and I ended up with a bigger wagon. What happened was, I was at my elementary school reunion. Now, at school reunions, that's the time that everyone tells all of their classmates all the great things that they're doing. It's brag time. Well, I happened to say that I was going to sail around the world. At that point, the principal of the school grabbed me by the collar and said, "You got to come to the school and tell the kids." They've never seen anyone of their race who was ever doing anything in sailing, historically or contemporarily. So I said, okay. I went to one of the classrooms and talked to the kids and told them what I was going to do and explained to them how it was going to help them in school. Well, the teacher's class I went to bragged to another teacher. Well, that's when it went bad. I got a call right after that from the head of curriculum for the Chicago Public School Systems. Now, I figured I'd have to clear it with her in order to speak to the classrooms and to write to them directly. No, it wasn't the way it went. When I explained to her what I was going to do, she said, "Oh, no, it can't be a classroom. It's got to be system-wide. You've got to get a bigger boat. You've got to get a budget." And I said, "Lady, I've got a 35-foot boat. That's what I'm going to." No. You got to take it big. You got to write curriculum. I said, "Curriculum? Yep." I'm saying, "Oh, boy, here we go." I ended up with not 2 grandchildren. One of them's right over there. I ended up with 30,000 grandchildren in Chicago and Boston, a 47-foot boat instead of a 35-foot boat. And instead of the Panama and Suez Canals, I ended up in the Southern Ocean sailing around Cape Horn. And that's when I got my earring. The most difficult part of the voyage was not going to sea. It was raising the funds. As Gary, I guess you know very well, it's raising the funds. I had a lot of ideas, and I wrote to a lot of sponsors and potential sponsors. And to them, it sounded like a great idea if someone else would pay for it. So finally, I kept telling people, I want to do this. It's going to be a great thing. And I wrote to one company, and I got probably the most condescending letter that I got in the whole time. I have hundreds. And one of them, and he said to me, and I quote, "Dear Mr. Pinckney, comma, we feel your project would not be cost effective for us, comma, good luck in finding a sponsor, period. Sincerely," and I'll mention only his initials, JM, Vice President of Marketing. Well, any Saturday night in my hometown in Chicago, they sell enough product to send 10 times my project around the world. Needless to say, I don't partake of any of their products. I don't care how good their Clydesdales and wagons look in parades. My earliest supporter, however, was a fellow Chicagoan, a founder of a place that we all know and love, the Bitter End Yacht Club in the British Virgin Islands and Virgin Gorda. This gentleman right here, this is his son, Richard Hoken, Myron Hoken's son, my first real substantial sponsor. He understood what it took to get this done, so he gave me a large amount of money, and it went quickly, as money goes when you're trying to raise funds. And I happened to bump into him one day, and I said, "Mr. Hoken, I'm going to make my trip, but unfortunately I spent all the money that you gave me trying to raise money." And he looked me in the eye and he said, "Son, anything that has to do with boats, it takes as long as it takes." And that became my mantra, and also the title of my autobiography. Next, Dr. Armand Hammer of Occidental Petroleum provided me with 2 great things. First, enough money to make the down payment on the 47-foot Valiant that Mark Schrader had sailed around the world in the BOC in 1986. And then a trip to England to consult with a famous circumnavigator. Matter of fact, the first non-stop circumnavigator, Robin Knox Johnston. He wasn't Sir Robin at that time. He encouraged me to take the southern route so that no one could dispute the validity and caliber of my sail. By the end of my odyssey, I look back on nearly 2 years and wonder how I had changed. Had I grown? Thinking on my time on the water, I believe I had seen the face of God in the beauty and power of the sea. I also had been attached and attacked by the snares of the devil with anxiety and fears at times. Along the way, I learned a few lessons, and I'd like to share some of them with you tonight. You're smarter than you think you are. I spent a great deal of my time growing up listening to the radio. We didn't have television when I was a kid. Reading, listening to people who had great experiences, and people who knew more than I did and were willing to tell me the things that I should learn. I learned a lot of facts, opinions, theories, and information that would be useless under many circumstances, but were vital in others. Paying close attention to what others had experienced provided me with the answers to some of my most difficult questions at sea. The next thing I learned is you're dumber than you think you are. No matter how smart you are, how well educated you are, you have to come to grips with the reality that there's a lot you don't know. The sea taught me so much about weather, sailing, my boat, but most of all about myself. Learning from every experience, good or bad, it expands the knowledge bank from which you grow and draw on in times of difficulty. Never allow that bank to get overdrawn. The other thing I learned is getting knocked down is not failure. There's a motivational speaker named Les Brown. He used to say, if I get knocked down, I want to land on my back, because if I can look up, I can get up. Well, I got knocked down twice. The first time, it scared me to death. The next time, I had learned something. I had learned that boats are designed to get up. And I think that if we learn to put that principle in our own intellectual, moral, and spiritual tragedy, we'll be much better, because we learn that we can get up even if we get knocked down. I thought if I sailed alone that I would be... I thought that if I sailed alone, I would be in control of my fate. Wrong. I quickly learned that the only thing that I did control was my reaction to what was happening. Our lifestyle leads us to believe that everything is under our control and submits to our intellectual, financial, and political power. At sea, you learn very quickly that that's just an illusion. We serve at the whims of nature and the powers over which we have absolutely no control. The very best we can do is control ourselves and do what we can to not fret about the rest. If we have prepared properly, we can handle more than we think, even though we cannot change it. Water boils at 212 degrees. If you have 211 degrees, you've just got hot water. You'll have to wait for that one last degree if you want it to boil. The waiting frustrates most people, feeling a lack of control by not having things change at their will. I learned that your ability to understand that in some situations are beyond your control. By taking them in stride, it will allow you to better focus on the things you can change. How many times in life have you said, I just can't go any further. I've reached my limit. What we consider our limit really falls short of the reality of our potential. Having the right motivator from without or within can change the whole perspective on our limits. I thought that on one occasion I had reached my limit. After many hours at the wheel, after my autopilot had given out on me, I figured I was just going to quit, let the boat float on and drift on itself, and I'd get with it when it got better. Well, I heard a noise behind me. a roaring sound. A rather large wave was rapidly approaching. I figured that if I did not get control of that wheel and handle that boat properly, I'd be swamped and in big trouble. Amazingly enough, the strength came back, the endurance came back, and I sailed through the storm without any problems. I learned that it's better to do what you think is right and make it go well for you when you think that you've lost your limits. I learned that no matter how much or how difficult things may be, adversity ends. What you have to do is hang in there until it's over. South Africa was the most difficult place I visited in my whole trip. It was 1990. The nation was still under the rule of apartheid, and that recalled the segregated past of my growing up in the 40s and 50s. My plan was to get in quickly, get water, get fuel, get supplies, and get the hell out of South Africa. A black sailor in South Africa who I had met many years earlier met me in Table Bay and escorted me into the Royal Yacht Club of South Africa, and there were clear customs, and he introduced me to a family who became my guides during the time that I was in South Africa. I traveled through the country, and I met people of different races and walks of life. Some I liked, some I avoided, and some sought me out. Taken one by one, I found that for the most part, they were not very different from me. Governments make policy, politicians make laws, but people make nations. Our basic goal, thank you. Our basic goals in life are the same regardless of our race, nation, language, or religion. We all want good health, longevity, financial security, freedom, and peace. We have, however, been kind of dissuaded from that. And I want to tell you about a conspiracy by a group of people that have been perpetrated on all of us. That group of people is a group called mothers. Everyone has one. I think somewhere in this world, and I found this universally true, there is a mother's school. I won't ask you mothers to tell me where it is, because everywhere I went, I found out that every mother knew the same thing. Mothers are great at being a physician. They can look at their child across the room and say, "Come here." Touch their forehead and say, "You've got a fever. We're going to take care of that." And they do. They have some remedy somewhere that they can fix that. Mothers are psychiatrists. When you're having troubles and doubts and everything, if you're keen enough to sit and listen to your mother's wisdom, she can probably solve your problems a whole lot better than the guy you're paying $125 an hour laying on his couch to tell him things he shouldn't know. Mothers can bend light. Einstein was wrong. Mothers can bend light. They can look around corners and see when you're doing something wrong. Mothers have X-ray vision. They can look through walls, jungles, sand dunes, forests, and know when you're doing something you shouldn't. Shut the refrigerator door. It's not time for dinner yet. But the most frightening things about mothers of all is this. Mothers can look into your eyes no matter what your station in life. Be you business mogul, financial wizard, doctor, lawyer, whatever. Your mother can look in your eyes no matter how old you get and tell exactly when you're lying. If we had all those guys that we put up, from congressional sessions and questioning, all the financial guys that did wrong, line them all up and say, "Look, tell your mother what you told us." we'd go a long way. And what I'd like to say is this. If our mothers are so much alike, why do we think that we are so different from each other? And I'd like to close with a quotation from a very passionate sailor who we all knew. And he quoted, and I quote him as saying, "I really don't know why it is that all of us are committed to the sea, except that I think it's because in addition to the fact that the sea changes and the light changes, we all came from the sea. And it is an interesting biological fact that all of us have in our veins the exact percentage of salt in our blood that exists in the ocean. Therefore, we have in our blood, sweat, and our tears the same amount as the sea. So that when we go back to the sea, whether to watch it or to sail on it, we go back to from whence we came." That sailor was John F. Kennedy. I'd like to thank the board of the National Hall of Fame Sailing for this award. Although it's a lifetime award, I hope it doesn't mean that I have to quit sailing. Thank you and fair winds.